Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
We're engaging with the words of Tisa. This morning we are coming close to the end of the book of Exodus. We've had the instructions for making the Mishkan, and we are now coming into Moshe getting the rest of Torah, and we have last week looked at some other instructions around Mishkan, and we talked about Purim coming, which is celebrated last night in the traditional world. We're celebrating tonight as KI and tomorrow night. So today is Purim, actual. So we looked last week at the ways the Mishkan and the story of Purim interact in terms of the authors of the Purim story being people who knew the story of the Mishkan, obviously, and the juxtaposition there. So what we're going to look at this morning is the scene after Moshe, when he gets the rest of the Torah on Mount Sinai. According to the rabbis, of course, Moshe gets both the written and the oral Torah from Sinai. The reason that's important is because the rabbis have the chutzpah to claim that their interpretations of the Torah are part of the oral Torah given to Moses on Mount Sinai. So there's the Torah shebichtav, the Torah that's written, and the Torah shebe'al peh, the Torah that's given by mouth. And so we have this chutzpahdik tradition that says all the way back to Sinai comes this tradition of interpretation. And so when somebody's interpreting and it's an accurate interpretation, then it came from Sinai as part of the oral Torah. Now, of course, the question you'll ask if you're like thinking is, how do we know it's accurate? There you go. So it's kind of this circular reasoning, right? Because my interpretation is accurate, it came from Sinai to Moshe as part of the oral Torah. Okay. Same with prophecy. Like, how do you know prophecy's legit? Yeah. Does it come true? Like, how long do you have to wait? Like, all that stuff. Okay. So we're going to look, and so everything we do, all of the midrashim that we quote, all the Talmud, all that stuff, that's all oral Torah, right? That's all considered the Torah shebe'al peh, is all considered oral Torah. Okay. Share my, this, by the way, remains one of my, and I know you've heard me say it, we're not supposed to have favorites. It's one of my favorite scenes in all of Torah. We've spent a lot of time on it. We're going to do that as well this morning from a little bit different perspective. As you know, it's like we're revisiting, we are revisiting all these texts all the time based on where we're coming from. It's a fairly intense time for us. So interpreting them through the lens of what's going on. So let's look at the text. I really encourage everyone. We studied one year at the perspective of Israel as a character, the nation Israel as a character, and the Torah, all these stories as the autobiography of Israel and the development of that character. And it's one of my favorite times that we've talked about this particular scene. So I encourage you to find that one. I'll find out from Bert what year that was. Of course, her book that I had burned up in my house, so I can't even access the title right now. I think it's called An Autobiography of Ancient Israel. But that shiur is particularly, for me, remains a really important shiur about understanding this text. Okay, so it's in our archives. All right, so let's start at a place familiar to all of us. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam brit olam. This should sound familiar. Yes? Stop, Luna. And the people of Israel shall keep the Shabbat through their generations, brit olam, like it's a covenant forever, for all time, between me and the people Israel, ot he, it is a sign, leolam, forever, ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et haaretz, that for 6 days God made the heavens and the earth, vayamash v'ish shavat vayinafash, and on the 7th day rested and selfified. All right, so this is the last thing that we have that God says to Moshe on Mount Sinai, and then it says Vayiten el Moshe, and so then it's given to Moshe, right? In the completing of the speaking, the two Shnei Luchot HaEdut, the 2 tablets of witnessing, Even Ktuvim be'etzba Elohim, stone It's written in stone, written by the finger of God. Etzvat Elohim, the finger of God. All right. So we're not told more than that, like that God engraves these stones. The Midrashim ask what's on the stones exactly, because to put the entire Torah on stone, Moshe wouldn't be able to carry it down the mountain, right? So most of the tradition has agreed it's the first 10 utterances, and often called the 10 commandments. It's Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 sayings. And most scholars agree. I mean, our traditional mythological scholarship says it's probably referring to that, because you can't put the whole Torah on stone and carry it. It doesn't matter, whatever it is. He's got these stone luchot, these stone tablets written by the finger of God. According to the rabbinic tradition, what does that mean? Why is that so spectacular that it's written by the finger of God? The miracle is it's engraved all the way through the stone, but either way you turn them, it reads the right way. Okay. All right. Vayar ha'am. So the people saw ki voshesh Moshe laredet, that Moshe, they translate boshesh as shameful, right? So busha is an embarrassment, something that's a shame, a busha. So this is something about shame. Laredet minahar, from coming down the mountain. So he's not there. V'yikahel ha'am al Aharon, and the people gather. And when it says al, it means on. They gather on Aaron. That's not good, right? Whenever you see this expression in Hebrew, that's not good. If they're gathering on, it means they're gathering against Aaron. Vayamru elav, and they say to him, Kum, get up. Aseh lanu Elohim, make us Elohim that will go before us. Ki zeh Moshe ha'ish, because this Moshe guy, ha'ish, the guy, so this Moshe guy, Asher ha'alinu me'eretz Mitzrayim, that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, lo yadanu mehayalo, we don't know what's happened to him. And Aaron says to them, take off the rings of gold that are the oznei neshechem, that are in the ears of your wives, your sons and your daughters, vehevi'u elai, and bring them to me. So this suggests that who's being talked to here? Who is Aaron addressing? The men. So this is where the tradition comes that the women did not participate in giving their gold for the golden calf. It is the men who were being instructed, and the men who obeyed. Okay? So all the people broke off the gold rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. So this sentence seems to contradict that one. Well, how come the men didn't just yank the earrings off their people, their women and children? And so the rabbis want to say they were so eager and so caught up in this desire to create this Elohim that the men ripped the earrings out of their own ears and took the earrings of their families and gave them to Aaron, right? So because they have to harmonize these verses that clearly don't align and don't match. And so Aaron takes it from their hands and makes an egel masecha, a calf that is, and then we have to figure out what is masecha. Scholars want to suggest that it is probably beaten gold put over a cast of something else like wood, which they did a lot in the ancient Near East with fetishes that they put in the cult sites. And Vayomru, and they said, Eile Elohecha Yisrael, these are your gods, O Israel, that brought y'all up from the land of Egypt. Vayar Aaron, and Aaron sees all of this, and he builds a mizbeach. He builds an altar, lefanav, in front of it, and vayikra Aaron vayomer chag la'Adonai machar. And so Aaron tells the people, chag, a festival, la'Adonai machar, will be for Yud He Vav He tomorrow. All right. So vayashkimu mamacharat. So they got up early the next morning. They're excited, right? So they get up early. Vaya'alu olot, and they made offerings, right? Before this egel, before this calf, right? And they got up litzachek, to make merry, is what you'll see a lot of the translations. Litzachek, to play. And we know that this has sexual connotations. We saw it with the Rebecca and Isaac story. And we saw it with a hint of it with Yitzchak and with Esav. So there's something going on here that's not just about, I mean, you'll see it dancing or whatever, but this is definitely a sexual connotation. So you might think like bacchanalian, right? You might think drinking and reveling before the gods as they did in pagan cultures, that as you consumed and changed your mindset, that was a way of worshiping the god. All right. So God says to Moshe, Lech, red, go, get down, because your people that you brought up from the land of Egypt are, right, messing up. Saru, maher min haderech asher tzivitim. They have turned quickly away from the way that I have commanded them, and they've made an egel masecha. They've made this calf, v'yizbechulo, and they are bowing to it, and they are sacrificing to it, and they are saying, these are the gods that brought you up from the land of Egypt. By Yomer Adonai and Moshe, and God further says to Moshe, I've seen this people. V'hine am kshe orefu, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Ve'ata, and now let me alone, let me be, that my anger may flare against them, and I will consume them, and I will make of you a great nation. Moshe appeased the face of God and said, Lama Adonai yichareh apcha ba'amcha. Why Yudhe Vavhe would your anger flare about your people that you brought up, that you brought up from the land of Egypt with great might and with an outstretched arm? Why should the Egyptians say that it was evil that God brought them out in order to consume them and destroy them from the face of the earth? Turn away from your anger and comfort the evil you're about to do to your people. Remember Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yisrael, your servants, that you swore to them that I will make your seed many as the stars of the heaven, and all this land which I've promised I will give to your seed, that they may inherit it for the ages. And God repented of the bad things that God mentioned God might do to God's people. So Moshe turns and comes down from the mountain with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand, tablets written on both their sides. On this one and on this one they were written. This is where the rabbis get that midrash that it was written on both sides, but it reads the same. That's the miracle. They were God's making. The writing was God's writing on the tablets. Yehoshua, who's, remember, partway up the mountain, Yehoshua hears the sound of the people and says to Moshe, Kol milchama b'machana. The sound of war is in the camp. And Moshe says, no, it's not. It's not the song of losing, nor the song of victory that I hear. And it was as they neared the camp and saw the calf and the dancing that Moshe's anger flared, and he threw the tablets from his hands and smashed them at the foot of the mountain. And he took the calf, burned it in fire, and ground it until it was a thin powder, and strewed it on the surface of the water, and made the children of Israel drink it. And Moshe says to Aaron, what did this people do to you that you've wrought such a great sin? And Aaron said, Al yichar af Adoni, may the anger of my Lord, meaning Moshe, not flare against me. You yourself know how bent on evil this people is. They said, make us a God who will go before us. For this Moshe guy who brought us up from the land of Egypt, lo yadanu mehayalo, we don't know what's become of him. So I said to them, who has gold? They broke it off and gave it to me. I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. Right, one of my favorite lines of Torah. Vayar Moshe ta'am, and Moshe saw that the people, like that, parua hu kifar o Aharon lishmetza b'kam. So for Aaron, this is a tangled Hebrew sentence at best, that the people had kind of busted out. This is an odd translation, but for Aaron had let it loose for whispering among their foes. Not sure exactly why this translation has it like this. Vayamod Moshe b'sha'ar ha'machaneh, and Moshe stands at the gate of the camp and says, for whoever's for God, come to me. And then we have the punishment of everyone who did not. So Levi takes it, the tribe of Levi has to take it upon themselves to avenge this apostasy. And Moshe returns to the mountain and admits that Chata ha'am hazeh, chatat gedolah, this people has sinned a great sin, and they have made themselves Elohei Zahav, gods of gold. Ve'atza, and now, if only you would lift their sin. If not, blot me out of your record that you have written. And God says to Moshe, whoever sins against me, sorry, the deal is, they're gone. Ve'ata, lech, now go, lead the people where I've told you to go. Here my messenger will go before you. On the day of my calling to account, I will call them to account for their sin. And God caused a plague to happen because they made the calf that Aaron fashioned for them. All right. So then God says to Moshe, get up and take the people. I will give a messenger to go before you to the land flowing with milk and honey. They, of course, hear that they are still in trouble. They are very upset. So God says to Moshe, tell the people Israel, you are a stiff-necked people. If for one moment I were to go in your midst, I would destroy you. So now take down your ornaments from yourselves that I may know that what I am to do with you. So meaning repent by disengaging from this idolatrous behavior. And because if I were to come among you right now, my nuclear force would just wipe you all out with me not being able to really do anything about it. So they take off all of this bacchanalian stuff, and Moshe goes to the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting, and there he requests an audience with God. And so the column of cloud comes down on it. This is the symbol that God's concentrated presence is there to speak with Moshe. And everyone could see that Moshe was speaking with God, and Moshe would bow to acknowledge God's presence and spoke with God face to face. Moshe says, you're telling me to take these people up, but how do I know that you're not going to let something bad happen to us? And if your presence doesn't go with us, please don't make us go, because otherwise, we can't do this, right? So Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh says, yes, you have found favor in my eyes, and I have known you by name. And Moshe says, please, if that's true, let me see your kavod. Let me see your presence. Let me see your glory. So wanting a kind of intimacy with Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. And Moshe says, and God answers, I will cause all of my goodness to pass in front of your face, and I will call out the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh before your face, that I show favor to who I show favor, and I show mercy to all I mercify. God said, you cannot see my face, for no human can see me, v'chai, and live. God says, here's a place next to me. Station yourself on the rock, and it shall be when my glory passes by, I will place you in the cleft of the rock and screen you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand. You shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen. My acharai, my afterwards, my wake, you can see, but not my face. So then God tells Moshe to take new tablets to replace the ones that he smashed, to come back on the mountain. Moshe does that, and God comes down in the cloud, stations Moshe by him, Vaya'avor Adonai al panav, and God passes by Moshe's face, Vayikra, and calls. And who's calling? God is calling. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Okay, what does God say here? We all know this one. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum Bechanun, Erech Apayim Berav Chesed Be'emet. Right, so this is what we say at the high holidays. God says to Moshe, God calls out as God's presence is passing before Moshe. Moshe is covered with God's quote unquote hand, and God calls Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, a mercifying God, gracious, long of nose, meaning slow to anger, v'rav chesed, and about abundant chesed, loving kindness and faithfulness. Notzer chesed l'alafim, showing chesed to the 1,000th generation, lifting avon, lifting sin and iniquity and other kinds of wrongdoing, right? And takes it away, but also holds accountable generations after the ones that have sinned. So there's generational consequences. For me, I like to think about global warming, right? The sins of the generations before us show up now Vayimahera Moshe, and so Moshe, after this experience, bows low to the ground. This is the appropriate response, and says, "Please, if I've truly found your favor, please let God go among us. This is indeed a hard-necked people. Forgive our iniquity and our sin, and make us your inheritance." God then renews the covenant with the people and says, "But be careful, shmar lecha, watch yourself, take care, right? Lest you go the ways of the people in the land that I'm going to bring you to, lest you bow to any other god." Notice the big resh of acher. This is a scribal tradition, so that we don't confuse it with echad. Possibly, we're not sure, but a very old scribal tradition. For I am a God who is entitled to kin'ah regarding y'all. The experience of being in a exclusive relationship, and the person who owns the rights to that other person's loyalty is entitled to kin'ah, often titled jealousy. It's a terrible, terrible English translation of kin'ah. All right. So this is the heart of Tisa. This is for me the heart of the parsha. Really is this incident of both the golden calf and then the rabbinic traditions around the golden calf. What is their sin? What is the problem? And then the process of tshuva, right? Of Moshe having the people do repentance. Then he asks for forgiveness on behalf of the people. And of course, we see at the end of this narrative, God says, "Salachti kidbarecha," I have forgiven according to your words, meaning according to your request. This is also part of the High Holiday liturgy. Salachti kidbarecha. Right, so that's the big choir, comes in, yay, God forgave us, at the end. Okay. All right, so somebody, and Melinda, you want to explain what's going on with you talking generationally about the millennials and the boomers, etc., what this chat is about?
Susan started it.
Okay, Susan. And Melinda, I don't care who started it. Does somebody want to tell me what's happening?
If we are the 1,000th generation, how long is that, or where in the 1,000 generations do we in this moment in history fall? I think is the question.
Nice. Good question. So, right, it depends how you treat history. For mythic history, it depends. Are you going to divide 58 whatever by 20? Or
Margot's got a calculator.
Yeah, exactly. So what are you dividing, right? That's part of the question. What number are you dividing into generations of 20? Is it since Noah? Is it since creation? Anyway.
Although I like the idea, if at any time when we read Torah, any Jews throughout history reading Torah always should think of the 1,000th generation, and wherever we in our current context are, we need to be thinking of that many future generations.
Beautiful.
Like that.
More like many of the Indian people, right? And they're from this country that believe that their actions to be decided, is it moral, is it ethical, is it okay or not? How will it impact the fourth generation, the generations later? If only we behaved that way, right? Think about what would be different, right? All right. So just a couple of random thoughts before we go on, which is often we want to think of this sin as idolatry because they are worshiping other gods. Aharon is clear that they are worshiping Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, right? He says Chag Yud-Heh Vav-Heh tomorrow. No one argues with that. They are not arguing that they are worshiping a god other than Yud-Heh Vav-Heh. So what's the big deal? What's the big sin? Right? So generally it's understood that they are insisting that God show up in the world the way they want it, because they can't see God right now because God's on the mountain with Moshe, and they don't trust that Moshe is okay and that God hasn't broken faith with them. And so they want and need a crutch. We talked about this one year, right? What Mark said it really well, a transitional, whatever, right? And they can't, a transitional object, they can't hold that Moshe is gone, right? The baby that doesn't understand that mom is in the other room, she's not gone, right? That they can't do that yet. And so that they need this transitional object to be able to represent God, and that they, in other words, that they know they need that. That's what they're asking for. They're not asking for another God, to worship another God. They're asking, give us something that we can look at that represents the God that brought us out of Egypt, because this Moshe guy's gone. So on the one hand, can't they be forgiven for that? That's all they know. All they know are representations from Egypt of the gods. They don't know anything else. So on the one hand, this is one of those years I feel a little bad for them, right? It's like, that's all they've seen their whole, for 4 generations, for 400 years. So, yet Moshe's pretty angry, right? Moshe hurls the tablets. He's pretty angry. Why is he so angry? And, we get lots of different interpretations about why. Susan, do you want to say something about it?
No, I just have a question. It seems to me that God's self-definition to Moses and his subsequent action are contradictory.
In terms of?
Well, he says he's all loving and he's, forgiving. And then he comes down and a plague.
Okay. So can we be both loving and faithful and punishing? Right. Okay. So because God says, all who are with me, come over here. So it's a self-selecting plague. The plague only comes for people who are not going to be willing to buy into Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh and Moshe are here. And we're going to leave the Egel. The people who are going to stay involved with the Kav are the ones who are going to suffer from the plague. So action, consequences. Does that deny a loving God? Bert?
I think it's certainly the Jewish tradition, and I guess we find this in Torah as well. You have God as judge and God of compassion.
Yes.
And the rabbi said, Adonai, the Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, is the God of compassion, and Elohim is the God of judgment, and that part of what we need, part of what God is to balance the two, which I think is a great lesson for all of us, to balance judgment with compassion. And because if all you do is judge, the world would die. And if all you did was have compassion, there would be no justice. So Beautiful. It needs to be a balance. So I think that's here and really amplified by the rabbis at a later point.
Beautiful. So the rabbis lean very hard into this. The 2 aspects of the divine, which is what is just and what is compassionate. And they are constantly in tension. And they suggest, what does the Chei HaOlamim mean that we say in our prayer book? A life of all the worlds. The rabbis say there were worlds created before this one, and they couldn't make it. So one was created just out of God's aspect of rachamim, of mercy, and it was too mushy, and it kind of just dissolved. And then there was a world created only from God's aspect of din, of justice, but it was too strict. And what was fair wasn't always the good thing to do, right? Just because it's fair, if you punch me, it's fair for me to punch you back, right? But a world like that where everything is exactly fair is not a world with compassion in it, and it breaks. It's too hard. There's no flexibility, and it breaks. So those worlds that were created just from din or just from rachamim, they didn't make it. This world stands because din and rachamim, God's aspect of strict justice, what's fair, and God's compassion working through us and then through human society, of course, is what keeps the world balanced. And at the high holidays, the image we have is moving God from Kisei Hadin, the throne of justice, to Kisei HaRachamim, to the throne of mercy, right? That's the work of the high holidays, to move God from Kisei Hadin, her chair of justice, to his chair of mercy. Okay. All right. What's another fascinating thing for me is that when Moshe says, let me see your kavod, let me see your glory, God doesn't say no. God says, okay, well, I need to refine your request a little. If you're going to chai, if you're going to live, and I want you to chai, I want you alive. So you're not going to get a choice here. I'm not going to give you the option. I need you, Moshe, to chai, to live. But you can't see my face and chai and live a human life. You can't do that. That's not possible. So I'm not going to give you that option because you need to chai. You need to live this Moshe life. I need you. You got stuff to do, which of course Moshe is every one of us. I hear this addressed to every one of us. You don't get to see the totality of it all. You don't get to be enlightened. You don't get to go to nirvana because you have a job to do. You have a human life to live. So you don't get the option to like experience everything in its totality, capital T, because you can't live a normal human life if you do that. So I'm not going to give you that option, says God. You have a human life to live right now. You have your own mission, each of us, whatever that is. We don't have to like it. We don't have to want to do it. Doesn't matter. I'm not going to give you the option. So what does God do? God says, this is the closest I can get to showing you, Moshe, the essence of who I am. And guess what? It's not visual. It's not visual. That's Egypt. That's Canaan. That's pagan. It's not visual. If you want the essence of who I am, close your eyes. I'm going to cover you with my hand. What is the essence? How do you experience the essence of who I am? And you go, you have passed before you, Adonai, this understanding, this calling out by the divine that the Yud He Vav He, existence, being, the unfolding of the mystery of the universe is loving and gracious and expansive and is forgiving of sin. And it's not even forgiving. The word isn't forgiving. The word is lifting of sin, right? This Yud He Vav He business lifts sin off us. And so that is how you experience, God says to Moshe, more intimately or more accurately, who I am, what I'm about. It's not visual. Rachel?
So what you were saying about Moshe wanting to, insisting on seeing God's face, and what really struck me this time is how flawed we see Aaron and Moshe. Like, I feel like the people can be forgiven for acting like toddlers. Maybe I'm just talking from like parent of a teenager right now, but I feel like as the parent or as the parents, they should be taking some responsibility. And Aaron's response seemed so much to me like the Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve are saying, no, it wasn't me. It was, the serpent, oh, no, it was Eve. It wasn't just a calf, it popped out. And then Moshe, the whole problem starts because he's off communing on the mountain. Now he comes down and he's like, well, I know they just freaked out, but can we have some more communing? Because clearly I haven't learned that they can't handle not being with me. So I don't know. Maybe I'm being very critical of Aaron and Moshe here, but it seems to me like the people can be forgiven for being children, but that Aaron and Moshe in their roles should be a little bit more, grown up. Not a very sophisticated way to put it. So
for sure, Aaron doesn't have a very good answer, right? Other than, how bad they are. And and remember it says they ganged up against him. So it's like, possibly Aaron is saying, they had a gun to my head, essentially. But yes, in a way, passing the buck. But remember, it's not Moshe who decides to stay up there that long in terms of the rabbinic understanding of it. It's that God is talking to Moshe all that time. So who really should have known better? Who should have known better as the authority? God, right? If we're going to talk about who's the parent who fell down on the job, I'm not sure it's Moshe, right? I'm not sure it's Moshe. Those are the years I have more Rahmanis for the people. It's like, what, God didn't notice that they were making a calf, right? But kept Moshe up there and waits until they're worshiping to send Moshe down? Really? Isn't that a bit of a setup? I don't know about y'all, but whether it was my kid or this four-legged child toddler now, it's like, if there's quiet for too long, or there's all of a sudden I realize there's a sound I'm not familiar with happening, that means get down there now, because she's got something she's not supposed to have, right? Or she's doing something she's not supposed to be doing. You don't wait right until you hear the crash. Anyway, I'm just saying. And it was just because there was a commentary about this, that really God waits until the people are worshiping. I'm like, that, I never thought about that. It's like, right. Like God somehow didn't know when they went to Aaron the first time. God could have said to Moshe, you know what? Your people are getting ready to step out. You might want to go down and see why they're so quiet. Maybe you want to see what's going on. Okay. I had in my house, it burned up, but I had a plaque maybe I'll have to figure out how to get a new one that said, don't make me come down there, God. Right? It's exactly right. Don't make me come down there. But God doesn't do that. God lets them screw up and then sends Moshe down and then gives them the consequence. All right. And Melinda?
Thank you. I'm still hung up on the men who were so ready and eager and willing to rip the gold from the fingers and ears of their wives and children. And it makes me think of the gun owners who say, well, I would do anything to protect my family. Like, really? Would you go to therapy? Would you work on your anger issues? Like, I would do anything for Yud Hey Vav Hey. Let me rip gold off of my family members. Really? Because actually what we're asking you to do is work together in community to build a just society. Are you willing to do that? Or are you looking for something that's really easy to put your hands on, put your eyes on, and feel like you've done something that you can point to?
I think, Melinda, you just so beautifully articulated what the actual sin is. I think that's exactly what the sin is, which is what you just said. That's why Moshe is so angry, right? It's because, right, like God's up there giving instructions for how to build a society reflective of Yud Hey Vav Hey, of exactly what God says God is. Rachum, v'chanun, right? Grace and forgiveness and expansiveness and compassion, right? That's the kind of society y'all are supposed to build. You're supposed to be a nation of priests and priestesses to me, right? Emblematic of these values. And you are so eager to give the most precious thing you have to build something immediate and shallow and full of itself, because it makes you feel better, because it's what you're used to. It's what they told you in Egypt is the true thing. It's the right way to worship. It's the one that makes you feel good. It's exactly how a lot of the tradition understands it. This is why they are in so much trouble. Exactly what you're saying. God is giving them the roadmap, and they're like, nope, thank you. We would like a double martini, please. It's easier. It's quicker. It's faster. We're used to it. It feels better. And thank you very much. The other thing sounds like a lot of hard work. Now, to be fair, they haven't gotten Torah yet, so they don't even know how hard it's going to be. But they have gotten the 10 utterances, presumably, that tell them they're supposed to not covet, and they're not supposed to steal, and they're not supposed to bite each other, and they're not supposed to pull each other's ponytails, right? They have been given kind of that basic outline, and even that, it seems like they're like, no, too hard. Alex?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that so much of the human experience? Like, we'll just, whatever's going to be easiest, well, I'm not going to take responsibility for my community. I've elected someone to do so. And then I'll just, criticize and all the things. But like, if I'm not willing to jump in there and take some action, I mean, there's so many ways that could be interpreted. It's just like, just taking the easy way out. I take the easy way out, I'm sure. I mean, do I compost? I mean, just like the little, there's so many things. Do I take this way instead of that way? Do I hire somebody to fix my dryer when I could read the manual and perhaps figure it out, or put in the hard work? I was hoping to return to that piece about where God turns his back, right? And you said that it was because Moshe is not ready to be enlightened, so to speak, or to, that he has his work to do to live the life. But what are there other interpretations of that moment? I mean, or what that's conveying? It's so interesting to me.
So traditionally, it seems that it's the way it's traditionally interpreted is God is informing Moshe that it is impossible to see God to encounter God face to face and survive it. So often, remember we saw Yaakov says, I saw God face to face and survived. When Yaakov wrestles the demon or the angel, the Ish, whatever it is, he names the place Peniel, because I've seen the face of God and have lived. So there seems to be something in the tradition that's very, very old that suggests one cannot encounter the divinity face to face and survive that encounter. So God says, I'm not going to let you because you'll die. You've got that perplexed look that says, I'm still not getting at something you're asking.
I completely understand that interpretation. There's just so much there in that alone.
But I think that's
all of like so what does that mean? Do we see aspects of God every day? Do we, it's so unbelievable, that passage to me, like,
yes,
every way, that until we are not living, then and what does that suggest? And what does that mean for us?
So I think for next week, you have a week to write that essay about the implications of that verse. I think it's huge. Why
would I write it when I could chat GPT it or Claude it,
Oh, please don't even get me started. That's just heartbreaking.
I'll take the easy way.
But I really think, Alex, that's exactly right. I believe that there are many implications that flow from that verse that are really, really important for us. That the desire to see divinity in its fullness is understandable, says the divinity, but impossible as long as you're on this side of the human experience. Now, that doesn't mean we're not supposed to get as close as we can, right, to living what divinity is, but divinity answers. Asking to understand all that I am is the wrong request. If what you want to know is my kavod, my presence, my clear glory, know something about Rachum and Chanun, right? Then experience something about graciousness and forgiveness and expansiveness and patience, that, slowness to anger, like all of that. If you want to know me, that's the closest you can get, human, and chai, and live.
I mean, it just speaks so much to this notion of faith, right?
What
are we all here for? Why are we all together in community looking at this? And why do we all, sorry, I'll speak for myself. Why am I here? Why, this notion of faith. If we will never see you, or we will never in this lifetime, or in my lifetime, I will not see divinity. I will not confront you. I mean, I love that, of course, through love, through kindness, through forgiveness, through compassion, we can experience that. But, and yet so many people, whatever faith you are, whatever religion, continue to, because it sustains us. I mean, it's,
okay.
If
So
there's no faith, if we
wait, stop. Wait. What sustains us?
This notion of faith, like if you don't have faith, then I'm not saying, excuse me, I'll speak for myself. If I don't have faith in something, that there is this divinity, that there, like, why am I Jewish? Whatever. But if I won't come face to face with divinity, then why do I continue to have faith?
Because
I know why, but I'm saying,
because I'm going to answer you. Yeah. Any Jew who asks me this question based on these texts, my answer is going to be, because that's the way it is. You cannot, with a human brain, encounter the fullness of reality, capital R, and not have your brain explode. Right. You can't. That's just how it is. So you can have hints of the bigness of divinity, of mystery, of reality, capital R. And those hints show up, says God, most accurately in kindness, compassion, patience, forgiveness. If you really want to get close to divinity, that's as close as you're going to get. You cannot take in the totality in this lifetime and live. That's just how you're designed, humans. Now, does that mean when we cross over the mortality line, it will be different? That's what the rabbis want to suggest. In Olam Haba, in the world to come, yes, we will know God, right? Because we will not be limited by this human brain and nervous system anymore. And there's a part of me that really resonates with that. Once I'm no longer in a physical form, what am I? I'm energy. Well, then I'm part of the divine that's everything anyway. I don't have to think about it or encounter it, because there is no thinking. I will be God. I will be of whatever God is, and I will intrinsically understand that in a way that human brains do not, if that makes any sense. Like, that's the comfort. That's the faith. That's the trust that there is something bigger that I cannot possibly comprehend. When it's time, I will be part of that, but not on this side of things. On this side of things, we're going to have to cultivate what we call faith, trust, right? And live into the experience of the divine through Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed, V'Notzer Avon V'Fesh. Right, all the 13 attributes that we just looked at. Okay, Margot, did you want to say something?
Just a quickie, Alex, from woman to woman, from Jew to Jew, from friend to friend, from community to community. As a person who has been on a vicarious spiritual quest for the last 10 years, believe me, if I could have not chosen to have this experience, I would have not chosen to have this experience. It has been very hard on me. It has taken all of my energy, and it is just like very wild to try and figure out what is God, why am I here, all the things. And I don't want to give the test results, everyone is on their own journey, but for me, developing meaning has been the most special and beautiful part of my own personal spiritual development. I have turned to my Judaism to reclaim some of that as handed by my ancestors and my connection to my family and their community, etc. But should your quest include like the just assigning the meaning that your heart intuitively tells you to embrace the things that bring you love in this world, that is God, that is the Holy Spirit, that is the presence helping you on your way, and it is a beautiful, beautiful journey, and may we all have such. So.
All right, thank you, Margot, for reminding us that none of us chose this. Well, some people believe we do, but
yes.
Yeah. Some people believe, we
never. I'm like waiting for it to finish my laugh here.
Yeah,
so
my mother and I fought about this all the time. So, yeah. So, but we don't choose it. What we get to choose, unless you believe that, it doesn't matter. What we get to choose either way is what we do with it. Since we're given this challenge, this gift, this experience, we all we get to really choose is what we do with it. Thank you, Emelinda. I couldn't agree more. It chose me. I did not. Just like this beast at my feet. All right, Bert. You're muted, Bert.
I always like to think of the face and the back of God as footprints in the sand. Mm-hmm. In the sense that we can see footprints in the sand, but we're not quite sure what did it. And in the world, we can see the effects, not always know what caused. And in terms of what we do in our lives, I think this teaches us that we have to concentrate on the effects, and that what we do matters. And the effect of what we do matters more necessarily than, intention's important, but it's also the effect that's really important.
My achorai, God says, right? You can't see me face to face and chai and live. You can see my achorai, my afterward. So what I hear Bert interpreting that to mean is the effect I have in the world by my presence and passing through it. And this is very much my interpretation of this that I love, which is, we usually don't recognize God in it. We recognize where godliness was for us in it after it. Right. So I can only really understand where God was in that afterwards. Susan, did you have your hand up again?
Just briefly, my earliest encounter with God, like in first grade, I got called to the principal's office because I kept insisting I'd seen the moving finger of God. When I wouldn't back down, they called my mom in, and she had to explain that it was the yod from reading the. So I saw the moving finger of God.
So that you were telling your truth, and you were getting in trouble for telling your truth because somebody didn't take the time to unpack what you meant by your truth, right? Exactly. Yep. I got called to the principal's office too because Rabbi Shmulevitz took Jerry Pelchevich's football and promised to give it back after recess and didn't. So yeah, that was a bad day. But I got to say, to my mother's credit, she said, "Is that what happened?" And someone said, "Yes." And my mother said, "Then why is she in the principal's office? Why isn't Rabbi Shmulevitz in the principal's office? If he said he was going to give the football back, aren't they told to tell the truth and keep their promises? Why is my daughter sitting here?" So it's no small wonder where I come from, people. Okay. So I want to look at a commentary. All right. So we're cutting into the middle of this commentary from IJS, from the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, looking at the Parsha through the lens of Musar practice, the cultivation of spiritual characteristics. So God says to Moshe, I will do this, meaning send someone up with you to watch after you, for you found grace in my sight, and I know you by name. And then they're calling this chutzpah, when Moshe says, okay, well, if that's true, show me your glory, show me your essence. In what may be the Torah's moment of deepest spiritual intimacy, God promises to reveal all of God's tuv, goodness, and the ineffable name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, placing Moses b'nikrat hatzur, in the crack of a rock, allowing Moses to view God's back, although not the divine face. God instructs Moshe to carve 2 tablets and reascend Sinai, where God proclaims what are known as the 13 midot, the attributes of mercy, which we saw. Moshe responds by prostrating himself and begging for forgiveness, this time not only for the people, but for himself as well. If I've gained favor in your sight, please go in our midst, even though this is a stiff-necked people. Pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your own. God responds, I hereby make a covenant, answering Moses' confession with a brit, forged in the crucible of human failure and divine compassion. This passage teaches that human brokenness reveals chesed, infinite compassion, as the essence of the divine. From this point in the Jewish narrative, the relationship between God and Israel is sustained by chesed, compassion that need neither be earned nor justified. While this teaching applies generally, it is particularly significant for Moshe, who shatters the tablets at the site of the golden calf, even though he had just defended the same people and solicited God's pardon. In shattering the tablets and standing in the crack of a boulder, Moses discovers that his broken self requires chesed as much as his people, and that he must cultivate his own capacity for chesed to guide them through the wilderness. In the gap, Moses discerns the fundamental spiritual truth that brokenness abides in creation, in nature, even in each of God's creatures, even in himself. And that we find the sacred not by judging that brokenness harshly, but by noticing how the fractures both elicit and reveal chesed, compassion. The Talmud deepens this teaching through a tradition that the Israelites carried not only the second unbroken set of tablets through the wilderness, but also the fragments of the set that Moshe shattered. The broken tablets and their narrative of failure and compassion, not the intact tablets, symbolize protection in an insecure world. On the basis of this tradition, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi taught his students to be compassionate towards elderly people who may have forgotten their learning due to old age, sickness, accident, or who to struggle to make a livelihood. We might extend this teaching and consider ourselves and our fellow human beings as an ark containing both whole and broken tablets, a pure neshama, soul, and an imperfect fractured self, with the healing quality of chesed always flowing through the cracks. Like Moshe, each of us is capable of unconscious reactivity, allowing our inner pain and brokenness to crash through our veneer, leading us to smash that which is precious to us and to hurt those we hold most dear. We are equally capable of denying and covering up our fractures and projecting our fallibility onto others. Tisa reminds us to face honestly, grow in awareness of, and accept fully our inner brokenness so that our cracks might help us transform into more effective vessels for blessing and healing. I love that teaching. I love this idea that one of the real teachings of this is that it is the people's failure, it's their brokenness, it's their impatience, it's their fear, it's their grasping, it's Moshe's anger and breaking something precious, it's Aaron's fear, it's everybody's brokenness that allows chesed to flow into the world. Without fragility, without brokenness, we really don't need chesed. And so like, it's a time right now for me, the reason this resonated so deeply with me, it's like, it's so easy for our brokenness for us to assume that's going to lead us to terrible things. And it can, is what I hear Rabbi Martin Margolius saying here. It can lead us to blaming other people, to denial, to projection, to hurting people close to us. It can lead to that for sure, unless we bring chesed to our own experience of brokenness and the brokenness of those around us. If we can, like the divine, allow all of that to elicit chesed, compassion, and forgiveness, and patience. If we can do that, and whatever it means to do that, like however we're going to have to get there, therapy, all kinds of things that it's going to take us to get there. Journaling, all the ways that we need to own our brokenness and to hold the brokenness of others. If we can do that, this parsha is saying both are in the ark. The whole ways that we're able to be the grown-ups in the room and to ourselves and not abandon ourselves, and the ways we're able to be present in our wholeness and fullness to each other when others are experiencing their brokenness and coming out of that place, that along with the times we're broken and we're struggling and we're kind of building a calf and we're acting out and all of that both are in the ark together. And that without the broken ones, we don't really have the presence of chesed in this world. And can we be gentler and more forgiving with ourselves? Because that's who we are. As long as they're human beings, that's who we're going to be. We're going to be these fragile, frail creatures that screw up because we're unable to hold the all of divinity and chai. As long as we're in this human lifetime, we're not going to be able to live in a way that is free of brokenness and free of struggle and free of failure. We're not going to be able to. That's how the human life is designed according to Judaism. That's just how it is. We don't ask why. That's just how it is. Now, can we bring chesed like God is showing in this interpretation? God is giving us the way by saying this is reality. When compassion is the answer to the cracks and the breaks of what it means to live a human life and create human societies, then that is the way of holiness. That is the path forward. And that is the way to heal and be as whole as we can and to come into tshuva, to come to a place of rectifying some of those breaks is through chesed and through racham. So I offer that to us this year as we suffer through so much brokenness here in our local world, in the world in general. I just can't even begin, right? And can we stay with chesed and rachmanis for ourselves and for each other and for the world and for humanity and all the other creatures that depend on us to make choices out of chesed for their own well-being, that we might have a long and flourishing set of lives and different kinds of lives, animal, mineral, vegetable, on this planet.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.